In the quiet town of Kasuwan-Gabra, located in Niger State, a tragedy unfolded that shocked Nigeria and drew the world's attention once again to the dangers of mob justice. At the center of this story was a woman named Amay, a local food vendor who was simply going about her daily life, serving meals and making a living in her community. But in one single day, everything changed. What started as a seemingly harmless conversation quickly spiraled into violence, leaving Amay dead in the most horrific way, burned alive by a mob that had turned against her. Her death was not just another crime. It was a chilling reminder of how fragile safety can be in places where rumor, religion, and anger collide. This case raises difficult questions about justice, intolerance, and the price of silence in the face of mob violence. According to eyewitnesses, the chain of events that led to Amay's death began with something that seemed ordinary. A man, reportedly joking, made a light-hearted marriage proposal to her. For many, such casual banter in a market setting would have ended with laughter or silence. But in this case, her response was taken differently. What she said in reply was perceived by some onlookers as disrespectful, and within moments, whispers of blasphemy began to spread through the crowd. What should have been nothing more than an exchange of words quickly spiraled into accusations, each one louder and more dangerous than the last. In a region where religion is deeply interwoven with daily life, even the slightest suggestion of irreverence can ignite strong emotions. And for Amay, this misunderstanding marked the beginning of a storm she could not escape. Once the accusation of blasphemy took hold, the atmosphere in Kasuwan-Gabra changed almost instantly. What began as murmurs among a few quickly swelled into a wave of outrage. Within minutes, a crowd gathered, their anger building with every retelling of what they believed Amay had said. Eyewitnesses recall how shouts turned into threats, and threats turned into action. The mob, fueled by emotion and a sense of religious duty, cornered Amay before she had any chance to defend herself. In those moments, reason was lost, and the rule of law was forgotten. Before security operatives could arrive to intervene, the crowd carried out their sentence. Amay was doused, set ablaze, and left to die in front of horrified bystanders. By the time reinforcements reached the scene, it was too late. Her life had been taken in one of the most brutal and dehumanizing ways possible. The image of her final moments has since haunted the community, a stark reminder of how quickly anger can turn into bloodshed when mob justice takes control. In the aftermath of the tragedy, the Niger State Police Command released a statement through its spokesperson, Wasiu Abiodun. He condemned the killing in strong terms, labeling it as nothing short of jungle justice, a crime in itself. According to the police, officers had been alerted and reinforcements were dispatched to the scene, but by the time they arrived, the mob had already carried out the attack. Amay's life could not be saved, and her killers had vanished into the crowd. The police promised that an investigation was underway to identify, arrest, and prosecute those responsible for the attack. They urged the public to remain calm, reminding citizens that no individual or group has the right to take the law into their own hands, no matter the accusation. But this was not the first time such assurances were given after a mob killing in northern Nigeria. For many, the question remained: would justice truly be served this time, or would the killers, like so many before them, simply disappear into the shadows of impunity? In Kasuwan-Gabra, the aftermath of Amay's killing left the community shaken. For some, there was shock. An ordinary food vendor, someone they had bought meals from just days earlier, was gone in such a violent way. Neighbors who knew her spoke quietly about their fear, too afraid to say much in public, worried that even showing sympathy could make them targets. Others in the community reacted with silence, a silence born out of fear of confronting mob actions. In places where mob justice has become normalized, speaking against it can feel dangerous. As one resident described, when the crowd gathers, nobody dares to stand in their way. Yet, beyond the silence, there was also grief and confusion. Mothers wept for the life of another woman taken, traders worried about safety in the marketplace, and ordinary people questioned how something so small, a casual exchange of words, could explode into death. The atmosphere in Kasuwan-Gabra was tense. Life in the market resumed, but with an unspoken heaviness. Everyone knew what had happened, and everyone knew it could happen again. For many, Amay's death was not just a tragedy. It was a warning about the dangers of unchecked anger and mob rule. To understand why Amay's death unfolded the way it did, we have to look at the legal and cultural environment in which she lived. Northern Nigeria operates under a dual legal system. The Nigerian constitution on one hand, and Islamic Sharia law on the other. In 12 states, including Niger State, blasphemy is considered a criminal offense under Sharia law. This means that words or actions perceived as disrespectful to the Prophet Muhammad or to Islam can trigger legal consequences. But in practice, many times accusations never reach a courtroom. Instead, they are hijacked by mobs who take the law into their own hands, bypassing due process entirely. This creates a dangerous contradiction. On paper, Nigeria's constitution guarantees freedom of religion and expression, protecting every citizen regardless of faith. But in reality, those rights are fragile in regions where religious law and public sentiment hold immense influence. What makes matters worse is how blasphemy accusations are often subjective, based on personal interpretation, anger, or even deliberate manipulation. Once the word blasphemy is uttered, it spreads like wildfire, and it becomes almost impossible to stop the crowd from delivering its own brutal form of justice. In Amay's case, what should have been a minor exchange of words turned into a death sentence, not because of a legal ruling, but because of the power of mob law, fueled by the tension between constitutional rights and religious belief. Asterisco. Sadly, Amay's case is not an isolated incident. Across northern Nigeria, there is a troubling pattern of mob violence linked to blasphemy accusations, with victims often killed before a court can even hear the matter. In 2022, the world watched in horror as Deborah Samuel, a young student in Sokoto State, was beaten and burned alive by her classmates after being accused of making blasphemous comments in a school WhatsApp group. Despite the brutality of her murder, very few were held accountable, and justice for Deborah remains elusive. Just a year later, in 2023, another tragedy struck. Usman Buddha, a butcher in Sokoto State, was accused of blasphemy during an argument. Within moments, a mob turned on him, stoning him to death in broad daylight. Once again, promises of justice were made, but convictions never followed. Now, in 2024, we hear the name Amay added to this grim list of victims who lost their lives to accusations that were never proven in a court of law. Each killing follows a similar script: a disagreement, a claim of blasphemy, the rapid gathering of a mob, and a violent execution before security forces can respond. This recurring cycle highlights not only the failure of the justice system, but also the growing normalization of mob violence in the region. Each case sets a precedent that emboldens future attacks, leaving citizens wondering, who will be next, and when will it end? Amay's killing has reignited conversations among human rights organizations, both within Nigeria and internationally.